Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Relay Bitcoin podcast. Today I have Danny Scott here from the UK, from Coincorner. How are you, man?
Hey Julian, thanks for having me on. I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
Of course. Yeah, very good, very good. Thank you. You guys are, let's say, for people who don't know you, you are the Bitcoin only broker of the UK. You've been there for a long time. You make it very easy for people to buy Bitcoin, to get into Bitcoin. Basically, what we have the similar vision and mission with Relay in the EU. You guys are doing this in the UK already for quite some time, right? When did you found the company?
Yeah, back in 2014. So we're coming up to 12 years old this year, actually.
Damn. So you must have been one of the first ones that really focused on Bitcoin, and maybe also one of the first ones that got licensing in the UK.
Yeah, we were so we were one of the first, yeah, from a Bitcoin only stance. Yeah, we have to hold our hands up. We did have some shitcoins on in the early days when we first launched in 2014, but then we slowly removed them and we focused on Bitcoin. I've always been Bitcoin only, to be honest. So I was mining Bitcoin and altcoins back in sort of 2013, and then I learned from a technical point quite a bit around Bitcoin and altcoins as well. And then I pivoted into the Coincorner side and the Bitcoin exchange, and that was always been Bitcoin has always been my focus since
Hmm.
2014, really. So everything else around it has just been noise.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's never been anything other than Bitcoin for me along the way, rightly or wrongly, but that's where we are today as well. And the regulation, yeah, we're headquartered in the Isle of Man, which is, for people that don't know, it's a small island just off the coast of the UK. It's a sort of crown dependency of the British Isles. We fell under sort of the AML formal obligation side under the regulator here back in 2016. So yeah, we've been doing all the compliance procedures that everybody's kind of caught up with today now, and everyone's typically doing around the world. Unfortunately, since 2016, which is I think we were second in the world behind Bitstamp, I believe.
Wow.
Bitstamp had it in Lithuania or somewhere like that, I think. So yeah, it was quite groundbreaking at the time from the Isle of Man perspective. Small government could move quickly, brought the regulation in actually very quickly, to be fair to them, and still have it into today. So with a few changes along the way as things have adapted and changed, but they did pretty well with that in the early days.
Hmm. How has the Bitcoin market, like in terms of as a broker, if you look at the market, competitors and clients and advisors and whatever, just how has the market changed in a decade now?
A lot less Wild West.
Yeah.
I think in the early days was so we had I always go back to there's a conference we had here in the Isle of Man back in 2014 actually, which was one of the first sort of Bitcoin, especially on the first and sort of UK side of this Bitcoin scene, and we had companies from all around the world coming over. So we had BitPay, Coinbase. I'm not sure if any other ones exist anymore, but there was your Roger Vers and everybody over here for the conference. Max Kaiser, Simon Dixon. There was loads of people all came for this conference, and at that point, I think we had about 110 applications to a local bank for 110 Bitcoin companies, basically, that wanted to relocate to the Isle of Man for the regulation and for the banking side. So they were all coming across here. Unfortunately, at that time, the UK bank that was allowing this to happen eventually pulled everything, and we kind of lost that whole foothold that it kind of started with. And all of them companies just disappeared and left just ourselves here in the Isle of Man, unfortunately. So there was originally we could have had Coinbase, BitPay, etc., all headquartered here, and they all disappeared and ran back to the US. So it was an interesting, like I said, there's 110 companies there. There's so many have come and gone. There's probably only maybe five of them that are still in existence today. The majority of them have come and gone. Shitcoin along the way. They've ICO'd along the way. They've blockchain concepts along the way,
Hmm.
and everything in between.
Lost their focus.
Oh yeah, that is exactly it. And I think they chased whether it's funding, whether it was quick wins. They unfortunately did lose that long-term focus, or whether they just never had that long-term focus from the get-go. So yeah, it was definitely a Wild West scene, and it was a survival of the fittest in some respects, and you just survived any way you could. Now, obviously, it's a lot more structured, obviously regulated, which is not always a good thing. And we are starting to see, obviously, the institutional side, the ETFs, BlackRock, etc., is starting to change the perception of the customer base as well. In the early days, customer base was young man on the street, the retail audience, young tech finance sort of guys. Now that's kind of changing, and we still see that sort of demographic, but we are seeing a lot more businesses moving into the space. We're seeing a lot more of the older generation now starting to move into the space. We're seeing more traditional businessmen moving into the space. So yeah, it's definitely evolved, and for the wider audience, I would say, which I think is an obvious statement, really, for the most part, for anyone that's been around Bitcoin for a few years. You start to see that.
So for you as a company, what changed as well is mostly the customers. At first, they were mostly retail, like smaller guys, maybe nerds that wanted to buy Bitcoin, and then more and more also kind of mass adoption, just normal individuals that wanted to buy Bitcoin. That now is much away from retail, much more to like private clients, high net worth individuals and businesses, even institutions like maybe trusts, foundations, holding whatever companies. Is that like, do you see more of an institutionalization also in your customer base?
We're seeing more moving that way, yes. Still, the retail audience is still quite prominent
Yeah,
from our
same
customer
here.
base. But we are starting to see now more high net worths coming in. We're seeing business owners, but the business owners being more independent business owners. So we're starting to get them in now, which could be, like tradesmen in the UK, where they've own and run a business. They've got some wealth from that, and they're obviously looking to diversify and invest in Bitcoin. Institutional, higher level, probably slowly dipping the toes in. You'll have seen certain things of that from the UK. Cartwright's did a couple of announcements on that over the last 12 months or so, with a couple of the pension funds and things. So they're starting to ease and starting to come into play now. But I think the UK is still quite a bit behind the likes of the US, and even places in Europe.
For someone like you who is into Bitcoin for such a long time already, like well over a decade, do you still think we are early? Because when you came in, clearly you were super early. But already now, I mean, Bitcoin is there for 17 years. Yesterday I spoke at an event where I had a guy telling me like, well, Bitcoin is not early anymore. Bitcoin needs a new narrative because the old narrative obviously doesn't work. It didn't work in 17 years. It didn't play out to be the digital gold and to be the inflation hedge, etc. How we can see it now, the monetary expansion is moving on. Gold is going up. Every hard asset is going up. Bitcoin is going down. So obviously Bitcoin failed. Now it needs a next iteration, right? That's the kind of a view that a lot of newcomers maybe still have, and that it's not really early anymore because now we have ETFs and the institutions are here, everyone is here. So where do you feel we are on the Bitcoin development, like trajectory? Are we still early or not?
I think early, the term early is relative, and it's relative to, like, back in 2014, I didn't feel like I was early, because I thought, oh, missed out the first 5 years, for example. And you could have bought Bitcoin for pennies, but now I'm buying it for hundreds of dollars. So like back then, I didn't think I was early. Obviously, 10 years later, then you start to realize, okay, you were early back then. The realization of that doesn't come till a decade later. So I think now as well, I don't want to say it's almost silly to be saying whether we're early or not, because in 10 years' time, people will be saying people in 2026 were early, because technically they were earlier than the ones 10 years later. So it is just relative to the timeline and the conversation that you're having. What Bitcoin is and what it's has or hasn't become, and people saying, like as you mentioned there, whether it's become the digital gold, etc. That's something. People always want things quicker than they actually happen, and people always want to try and um, push, or they want to expect, or they want to imagine that this thing's going to just go to $1 million overnight. And if it doesn't do it within the next 12 months, then it's a failure. And it's a silly thought process and a concept, I guess, but it's just human behavior. It's what we do. We kind of we are impatient as mankind. We are impatient. We want everything, especially in this day and age. Everything is at fingertips. Everything's click of a button. Everything comes quickly. If you order some food online, or you order some clothes online and it turns up the next day, or turns up an hour later, it's like, we expect that now. So we expect that speed. When it comes to Bitcoin, it is a long term, it's an evolution. It's a whole change in monetary system. It's a whole, it is a whole evolution to change the mindsets of the population of the world. It's going to take many, many decades. This isn't an overnight thing. And mass adoption. People talk about mass adoption being 5 years away, 10 years away, etc. We could still be talking mass adoptions 20, 30, 40 years away. We don't know. It's kind of like, I guess, the internet is your best comparable in some respects, where what year are we? Is it 40 years into the internet, I think, something like that. But maybe 30-ish, where the internet had websites and browsers where you could actually do things. And even 30 years later, the whole population of the world still doesn't have access to the internet. And don't get me wrong, there is a lot that do. But there's a lot of people also that go through everyday life without really using web browsers and the internet. So it's still not hit that mass adoption, I guess. It depends on what you define as mass adoption. So yeah, I think I kind of ignore them comments around whether it's failed, or whether it's digital gold, or whether it's not happened as quick as we expect it to. But for me, they're noise, and just focus on the target and focus on the goal of where we're going.
So can it be compared to these other technologies, these big shifts in technology and or finance? There were not many, right? But as you said, in the 80s, the internet came up, and then kind of with that, the credit cards and credit card online payments. And these both of them took decades, right? And as you say, even today, there's at some events I speak, the people take notes with a pen on paper, and probably then, I don't know, maybe they go home and put it into the computer or not, but I don't know how many people here also in Switzerland, for example. Switzerland is like this innovative country in terms of technology and finance, but there's still a lot of people and companies that really haven't really adopted the internet as such, or like people still pay invoices not with their e-banking. Many people are not on e-banking. They go to their bank branch and pay the invoices there in cash. Like, this is still the whole adoption hasn't really happened after decades, even though you would say, of course, the internet has found mass adoption and credit cards as well, but it did take decades. And now many people say, oh, like AI overtook Bitcoin because this was really fast, right, within a couple of years. But AI existed for a long time before ChatGPT. That there was this ChatGPT moment that initiated this bubble and this huge exponential growth and adoption. But before, already for decades, there was AI before it was cool, right? And I feel like we're probably also in this area where it's Bitcoin before it's cool. It's not really cool yet. It will become cool. There will be such a moment, but or maybe we're completely off. Maybe it's completely something fundamentally different than these other technologies. Where would you kind of categorize this, and what can it be compared with?
I guess the internet is probably my best comparable in some respects. The other one is kind of like, I guess, data infrastructure, telecommunications and data. So all the telecommunications companies around the world, so mobile phones, but we used to have landlines originally, and then we had, you had cables running everywhere to allow you to be able to pick up the phone and dial somebody on the other end. How many decades that took to become what it is today, where you just pick up your smartphone and you can call anyone around the world, and actually you can do that over data as opposed to over the telephone networks. And that has evolved to where it is today. And that is, I mean, I don't actually know when the first telephone, was it Alexander Bell that created the telephone? and I can't remember what year that was. But we're going back many, many, many decades, and that took how many decades we are now into where we are. And it was laying them cables all around the world, even which became almost the backbone, I guess, for the internet and the data cables, and then that infrastructure that was in place was allowed the internet to piggyback that and to become what it was today as well. So I think all of these, definitely, I think the data side, definitely the internet side, are very comparable. I think credit cards are another obvious one, which, yes, can be seen. And again, these are, 50, 60 years. I think it was Jack Mallers did his speech in Miami at one of the conferences, and he did a whole thing on the credit card process and the evolution of that. And how many decades that took to go from, I think, was it the Diners Club was the original credit card, and then eventually that's evolved into the Visa and MasterCards of the world. But that took 60 years or whatever it is to where we are today.
Yeah.
And even still, as you mentioned there, people are still paying in cash. They're not necessarily using cards. So it's, what is mass adoption? What is success? Has the internet failed? Have credit cards failed? That's because they don't, because we're still using cash. I think it's a mute comment or a mute argument from people in that sense. If it has a use case and people are using it in everyday life, then it's a success, regardless of the scale, I guess, in some respects. And I think even at the minute, the scale of Bitcoiners and people that use Bitcoin in everyday life, whether that's for payments, whether that's for investment and store of wealth, it doesn't matter what that use case is, it has found a use case.
Definitely, and it is 10 to 20% of the population, at least here in our region, like in the EU, 10 to 20%. So it's up to every fifth person already is using Bitcoin. But definitely you could argue we're still very early on this kind of S curve. So also what all of these technologies and adoption curves have in common is that they are S curves. So for quite some time, and probably 2 decades at least, is like a slow, very slow, early adopter driven adoption. And then at one point it has this moment, right? I don't know, maybe the Google moment was it for the internet, like around the dot-com bubble or after it, which was 20 years after the internet started to exist. There was for AI now is the ChatGPT moment that after 10, 20 years of this technology existing actually brought it to a lot more adoption. And I think with Bitcoin, we're still early. We're still at these 10, 20% early adopters. They're, as long as really our moms and grandmoms don't really use Bitcoin and don't really understand it as digital gold, we haven't really hit this steep adoption curve yet. So I think the 2017 bubble was not the big bubble. The big bubble will probably is only just ahead of us, and so it will be very interesting on how this will play out. Do you think there's gonna be any surprises in like how this will play out in the future?
It's a good question. Definitely will be surprises. I mean, even at the minute we're going through the BIP 110 issues with Luke Dash Jr. and a couple of the guys there that are supporting things there. So I imagine we're still going to. That's not going to be the last one of the sort of fork battles or whatever we want to call them there, the block size war style conversations. There's going to be more of them going ahead, and they're going to be potentially, at the minute we've had it as a community split and community between us of butted heads and gone in different directions, and that's where the forks have come from with Bitcoin Cash or BSB, etc. But then as we grow and as Bitcoin becomes more adopted by institutions, via nations, that's where it'll get more interesting because, at what point does a nation state turn around and try and change the Bitcoin protocol?
Yeah.
And that's where we will start to see a bit more of a challenge. And these are kind of warm-up challenges to what will be a bigger challenge in the future. And I guess hopefully the work that's being put in now is going to be strong enough and sustainable enough of a foundation to basically evade them battles in the future. So yeah, I think we're going to end up with a couple maybe of institutions or even nation states try and take over the Bitcoin protocol in some capacity. So yeah, that I believe will happen at some point, and I think that'll be probably a surprise to some people. But I think for people paying attention, I think they will be seeing and understanding that, yeah, that's probably a likelihood that will happen at some point in the future. Um, part of the journey, it makes everything like that makes Bitcoin stronger. And every time we get through these things, Bitcoin comes out stronger at the other side. So it will be expected, and Bitcoin, I'm positive will come out the other side as a stronger force.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, Bitcoin looks kind of boring, right? To the normal person out there, it's like, oh yeah, half a year ago there was this all-time high at 125. That was kind of interesting, fast price increase. But then, of course, everyone was like, oh no, now it's too late for sure. Like it's 6 digits per Bitcoin. It's too late for me to get in. Now, quite a drop of almost 50% in 6 months. So now everyone is kind of scared. But also it's kind of it became boring because people don't believe that it's going to be a 5x or 10x anytime soon again. And everyone knows now about Bitcoin. When it's high, they don't want to get in. When it's low, they fear it, but they don't really want to touch it because they don't know about it. They don't understand it. Like 80% of the people still don't understand it, and it's kind of boring for them. So I'm sure you see this as well. Kind of the retail sentiment is not really hot at the moment, but it's wild to think into the future and anticipate that what could potentially be what could happen around Bitcoin in the next 10, 20 years, because it is this asset that is 100% fixed, right? It's the only asset, it's the hardest asset, and while everything else can just be inflated. So when we start seeing these bigger moves from this printable money into Bitcoin, what this could do to the dollar price of Bitcoin, and then what kind of excitement again this could evoke in retail investor sentiment and FOMO, etc. It's pretty crazy. Like, I mean, if we see some nation states now getting in, some big institutions getting in. Michael Saylor just bought 1.2 billion or something, and it's by raising cheap fiat money and putting it into Bitcoin. That's just one company that is like not even a big size company like Nvidia or Apple or Google. It's actually a relatively small, like medium sized company that can just raise billions and put it into Bitcoin. Like, just to show, these are very early first steps to show what can happen once this whole endless money will start flowing into Bitcoin, which is the hardest money, right? Any comments on that? Because I know you're also into Bitcoin Treasury companies.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Saylor is at the minute running away with his purchases in comparison to everybody else. Yes, we have helped found a UK Bitcoin Treasury company, based on not just buying Bitcoin for the Treasury side, but we make use and utilize that in the Lightning Network that's kind of our business model. So we're supporting the network in that way via Lightning and generating fees via the routing on Lightning as well. So it's a slight difference to ourselves, to MicroStrategy. But yeah, we would love to be able to buy at Michael's scale, but not possible right now. Hopefully in the future. And I'm sure, like you're right, like how many, even just the treasury companies alone buying Bitcoin at the minute is massive scale. This is large scale, and the price still where it is, I think is surprising to everybody. It is, at the end of the day, it is supply and demand, and we're going to see this happening. I guess myself, yourself, we do see you get it from Relai side, and I obviously get it from Coincorner side, and you see the behavior of the customer base and what they do. And you are exactly right. When the price goes up, everybody wants to buy it. When the price goes down, everybody panics and sells. Sorry, when I say everybody, I don't mean everybody, but you get a large portion of customers coming along and selling when the price is dropping down. And that just creates a further snowball effect of that price. And that's all we've seen again. And it is, I think, often, and don't get me wrong, sometimes there are things that happening behind the scenes that when we saw FTX blow up and things like that, where that had an impact on the price, and that caused and created the price to drop to where it was, but it was the fear of that afterwards that created that. And typically it is genuinely the boring answer of there's just more sellers than buyers at the time. And that's why the price goes down to where it is. So even though the treasury companies are buying at mass scale, and it is mass scale for the most part, and the same with the Bitcoin ETFs in the US, there is obviously more sellers at the minute. And I don't know whether that's I guess the ones that we start to see are the panic. The price has gone down and people panic and they sell, and it's human behavior. It's what we do. It's a risk off. They want to take the risk away from any investments, and they want to just come back into cash because that's the safe, sustainable method in the short term. And typically, most of them then come back into Bitcoin afterwards anyway. Once the price starts to settle down, starts to go back up, they start to come back in. And we've seen that pretty much every cycle, and we are seeing that and witnessing that again, I guess, at the minute. We are, I would say, at the minute, them panic sellers have kind of finished from what I see and from what Coincorner's seeing at the minute. I'm assuming you guys are experiencing the same, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we saw actually quite many dip buyers in February when really we had these 5%, 10% drops within 24 hours, 48 hours. We had a lot of dip buyers. We had good volumes, not many new customers coming in. And it feels like the dip buyers are a bit exhausted now too, but also the panic sellers, I agree. I think that the high volatility is kind of over. That's also what we're seeing now for the last at least 2 weeks. It's really stable between 65, 70. Now it's a bit higher again, like 70K US dollars. So it looks like these bigger long-term purchases from ETFs and MicroStrategy and bigger companies, they're now showing a little bit into the price again because the seller pressure is lower. Also, I feel like what is over is kind of this the OGs selling, this IPO moment, that the OGs that had Bitcoin for 10, 15 years were cashing out around 100K. That sell pressure is also fading a little bit, I feel like. And in terms of the retail users we are seeing, basically they have a savings plan running. When there's a dip, they buy if they have cash. If there's the dip after the dip after the dip, they don't really have cash anymore. So there's less and less buying after the dip. So of course there needs to be some time until they have their bags filled again with cash so they can buy the dip. The regular buying overhaul is clearly there for us. It's like 80% buy, a 20% sell ratio. I'm sure you're seeing roughly the same. So in the long term, it's just, the more people that have understood Bitcoin as a long-term store of value, the more are just buying and accumulating, and the less are selling also in these volatile times. Really what it takes is just time, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny as well. You mentioned about the sort of the OG sellers now starting to dry up, and we obviously being an older exchange, we do have a lot of older customers, for a decade old plus some of them, and it is interesting to see some of them, and they typically what we see in the media, and we see, I think there was one that did a big trade for, like, was it a couple of billion or something, to like $2 billion worth, and they said it was some OG from wherever. They didn't actually define who that was. But we don't really see any coming in and selling at mass scale. We typically see like more OG style where they'll come in and they're selling to buy a house, or they're selling to buy something that they're not necessarily selling because they are fully exiting their Bitcoin position. We get some that will come and sell small amounts every month and to live off, because they pretty much retired on the Bitcoin. They can do what they want, and they will come and sell small amounts as and when they need to. So it's more of a lifestyle sell than they don't believe in Bitcoin or fully exit in their Bitcoin position sell. None of it is. I don't think we've had. I can't think of a single situation where we've had that, to be quite honest. Most of the guys that are like 10 years plus in Bitcoin, they know Bitcoin by now. They understand it from a long-term perspective. The only reason they're selling is for some sort of lifestyle piece.
Exactly. I mean, it never made sense to me that a long-term holder, I think there was this one wallet that had like 13 billion, like 13,000, 12 or 13 billion US dollars worth of Bitcoin on one address, and sold it all in like a day or two or a week or whatever. Like that never made sense to me. If you hold Bitcoin for 10 plus years, you're not gonna sell all of them.
The,
It's
the
that
only
so that what that's what never made sense to me, and I was always looking for a logic for that. And the only logic I can come up with is that some of these big OGs came together and tried to manipulate the market by just really dumping all their coins at once, making the price fall, having like a panic, the retailers panic selling, so the price drops 10-20%, which it did, and then buy back. That's my only conclusion. Or do you have another idea?
Yeah, the only other one is which we have witnessed, to be honest, is the inheritance side. So, for example, if
Mm,
any of the OG side do die, then that goes to their estate. It goes to
mhm,
sometimes it can go to their kids, sometimes it can go to their siblings
mhm.
or partner, and sometimes they don't. Whoever that gets left to, they don't understand what Bitcoin is. They know nothing
For
about
sure.
it. Their
Yeah.
simplest option is, can you sell all the Bitcoin and just give me the cash? And that
Mhm,
is, we have done that in the past, and we have not at not a billions of dollars scale, but we've done that in the millions of dollars sort of
mhm,
regions for
mhm.
people. And maybe there's some estate planning, inheritance thought process there for some of these guys, where they're thinking, they put that in place now before they die as well, maybe, or maybe they have died and it's gone to the estate and that's been now passed on, and it has to be liquidated to be distributed out accordingly, for example. So
That makes
there is
sense.
that option as well, which I think is we have witnessed that option and we've experienced that option, so it definitely does happen. But to what scale? Maybe the billions of dollar ones. I'm not sure how true them ones are. I don't know.
Hmm, hmm. In any case, even if it was manipulation, it's just a short-term thing that you can do now because it's still relatively small. But the bigger and the more mature the market gets, and the more also bigger participants in the market, and the higher the trading volumes and the lower the volatility, the higher the liquidity, etc., the less this will even be possible. We're now at between 1 and 2 billion of market cap. Once this will double, triple, then things like that will not even be possible. I feel like there's now much more uncertainty because of these things still being possible due to the size. But as we've seen in the last 10 years, Bitcoin grows fast. So in the next 10 years, this will also be over. It's all very short term and not sustainable.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think long term it's focus. I think what we started off on earlier on, it was the losing the focus and losing where you are. Yeah, the focus is, for me at least anyway, and hopefully a lot of the Bitcoin companies out there, it's that building the foundation still of what Bitcoin is and hopefully what it eventually becomes. And the noise in between, let's say the altcoins, the blockchains, the ICOs, trading, and trying to manipulate to make more money, it is noise for us really, and just trying to make Bitcoin what we believe it will become.
Very well said. Very well said. Don't lose the focus. The fundamentals haven't changed. Like in these many ups and downs that you've seen over the past 12, 13 years, the fundamentals have never changed. And also, they haven't changed in the last 6 months, where Bitcoin went from the all time high of 125K to down to almost 60K, so like 50%. Fundamentals are exactly the same. TikTok, next block. Bitcoin still does what it does. It's still the hardest money. It's still digital gold. It's the best store of value ever, and all the rest is keeps inflating. So long term, Bitcoin will keep accruing value and will find more adoption. Thank you so much, Danny. Great, you're sticking around even after all these years. Hopefully for another decade, and very very glad to be able to speak to you. Thanks for your inputs, and stay in touch. Last question I almost forgot that I also want to ask you is, okay, you believe in Bitcoin. How much of your total net worth is in Bitcoin in percentage terms?
0%. With boating accidents happen. I live on an island.
Ah, yeah, yeah, nice.
Yeah, no, I think typically, yeah, I mean, 100% in terms of, I have Coincorner, I have obviously Bitcoin, but with the companies as well, they're all typically Bitcoin companies, the Bitcoin Treasury company, that is all exposure to Bitcoin in whatever way. So it is typically 100% is pretty much exposed to Bitcoin. I think if Bitcoin did go to zero and we all ride it to zero, then
Yeah,
net worth disappears with it. It is the thought process.
exactly.
So yeah, it's conviction, I guess. And yeah, I assume everybody else within 10 years plus within Bitcoin starts to come to that same conclusion. Don't get me wrong, there's certain lifestyle costs that are included, and you have to account for them along the way, but small percentages along the way. So yeah,
Lovely.
that's
I
probably
love
the
the
best
conviction.
answer I could give. But thank you for having me on, Julian. Appreciate that, and thank you from you guys as well. Relay in Europe as well is keep doing everything you're doing, and we need more companies like you guys and like ourselves that are Bitcoin focused, driving that adoption in a Bitcoin manner as opposed to the altcoins.
Let's go. Let's go. We keep stacking. We keep pushing. Thank you, Danny. Have a good one.
Cheers, Julian. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.